Welcome to the Law Dad Roy podcast, featuring trial dad and trial lawyer Roy Willie. Join us as we break down the biggest cases, the legal strategies that shape justice, and the stories behind the courtroom victories. Whether you're a legal pro, a curious mind, or just here for the ride, this is the podcast for you. Let's talk law. Let's talk justice. Let's talk winning. And now from beautiful downtown Charleston, South Carolina, here is your host, Law Dad Roy Willie.
All right, here we are.
Here we are.
Haven't seen you a lot this week, so good to see you.
You too.
Glad to be here in our comfortable chairs.
I'm so glad. On another note, I'm so glad the weather is finally starting to turn because I'm done with this rain and this cold.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, I like spring. Spring is good. You know, it's new beginnings. We appreciate the warm weather.
Yeah, no kidding. All right, so what we want to talk about on this one, on this particular pod is, and for those of you that are listening, for the first time, really, what we talked about on our initial podcast.
I just have a question. So do you think there's any connection between podcasts and them calling the things AirPods? Random question.
AirPods. It might be.
Might be. I think it's interesting. Because podcast, is like a made-up word, right?
Oh, that's a totally made-up word.
Totally made-up word. Based on, iPod, I think. And the podcast was on the iPod.
It might be.
Maybe. And then we have AirPods to listen to your
If
podcast
anybody knows that and is listening.
iPod. Yeah, maybe let us know.
Let us know.
Random thought.
I never even thought about that.
Yeah.
But on our initial podcast, we talked about core values a lot.
Core values.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that we're really kind of talking about, and you talked about, was this idea of how you're not a fan of the phrase work-life balance.
Right.
Correct. It's more of an integration.
It's work-life integration. Yeah, I mean, balance. The problem for me is work-life balance. It doesn't imply, it actually explicitly says that there have to be a trade-off, right? If things are being balanced on a scale, or you're balancing balls in the air, you're balancing plates, at some point there's a trade-off between one or the other, right? So when people talk about work-life balance, what they're talking about is, well, how much of my life am I willing to give up for my work? Or how much of my work am I willing to give up for my life, right? And different people struggle with different aspects of that, because some people are, more work focused, and that is where they find, their highest and best use and their joy. And so they have to really, they say, balance that with their life, their family life, their social life, their spiritual life, whatever. I just don't like the term, because I don't think that those things should be balanced, right? I had a great uncle that always said, if you don't work, you don't eat, right? So you have to work in order to eat, in order to survive, in order to have a life. And the same way, it's also from scripture, I think it's in Thessalonians. But anyway, side note, he didn't make that up. But the other side of that coin is that in order to have a successful work career, you have to have a life, right? People that are just locked in offices and not out being social, not finding fulfillment, are generally not the highest producers in any industry. So what I say is work-life integration. I think that the two things have to work together in order to fulfill the highest calling that a person has in both spheres. So when you're working, your life should be integrated with that. When you're doing life, your work should be integrated with that. This idea of being chained to a desk for 12 hours a day and then you're free to go live your life, I think is very antiquated and does not work for, frankly, people of our generation and younger, because people have decided that, life is equally, if not more important than their career and their work, as it should be. And so I use the term work-life integration. I think that the two have to be integrated. They are complements to one another. They are supplements to one another. And that when we begin to look at things through that lens, it's not this question of, and I'm not suggesting that, you should have your iPhone out at all of your kids' sporting matches or whatever. But for example, my oldest son is a swimmer. Okay, so we go to these swim meets. These swim meets are, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours long.
Those are long.
These are long things. He's swimming 4 times for a minute or less each. Okay, so during that period of time, if I was in a work-life, balance kind of mode, I would say, okay, this is life, so work can't be in this space because it has to be balanced against it. So I'm just going to sit here and mind-numbingly watch all of these other kids that I don't know swim. Like, while my son is over with his team, we're not able to interact, and I'm just sitting here. No, I'm not going to do that. That's a complete waste of time, in my view. I'm going to spend that time either reading something that I want to read, to fulfill other parts of my life, or perhaps working. We were at a swim meet a couple weeks ago up in Greenville, the state meet, and it's one of these things like, 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock or whatever. And when he's not swimming, like, I was working.
Right.
I can do emails, I can do actual work there. The chlorine opens up the brainstem, so it's good. So that's how I look at it. That's really how I look at it.
So how do you? I think part of it is that the argument. I'm going to play devil's advocate. So the argument is, if I'm at said swim meet and I'm not totally engaged all the time, right? That there is no balance. It's always there. It's always on top, right? So, in order for you to do so, how do you organize? Organization is important to work-life integration. Right. How important of a role do you think that plays? Right. Because everybody's like, oh, I live off my calendar. Right. But you do have to have things planned out if you're going to try to integrate certain things. You just can't say, okay, I'm sitting here doing nothing right now, I'm going to do this, right? For work, or I'm sitting here doing this, I can sneak in that, right? So how do you organize it?
Yeah, so I think that it's critical to have whatever your system is, for organization. Mine is my calendar. So I use my calendar to organize my work, my life, my everything all in one place. And so I have some things which are labeled on my calendar in all caps, like the first two words are in person : and then it is whatever it is. And that tells me that I have to be there. I have to be present. There's probably some preparation that needs to be scheduled, prior to whatever that event is, whether it's, grab a swim bag, or whether it's read over, the email and notes for this particular meeting that I'm going into.
Right.
There are other things which are things that I want to accomplish, which are tasks, and I assign time to those tasks. I believe that whatever you are doing will take as much time as you allot to it, right? So we know that. We know that from, middle school and high school, right? Like, if we sat down at 5 o'clock to do our homework or whatever, and we had all this time, it would take all that time because we would do other things in between and get distracted. If we knew that we were on the school bus at 8:30 in the morning and getting to school by 9 and that homework was due, it would take us 30 minutes.
Right.
Because we would do it on the school bus, right? So whatever it is you're doing takes the amount of time you give it. So when I'm picking a task, whatever it is that I want to do that day, I say, okay, how long do I think this should take? How much of my day am I willing to allot to it? And I allot time to it. And I put it on my calendar. Now, things come up, right, that are unavoidable, that throw you off. And so it's important, I think, to have flex time in your day. If I don't get something done, and it's, something that is, not an in-person event, or it's just a task, it just moves forward in my calendar. So at the end of my week, on Friday, I always have a list of things that I did not get done. I'm not 100%, completion rate ever on a week. So that's fine. So those things will just bump forward to the next week.
Yeah.
But if I'm sitting in a swim meet on a Saturday and I've got, 6 15-minute tasks, which could be as simple as, review Chris's market analysis report for, Knoxville, Tennessee, DMA or whatever. And I think that's going to take 15 to 20 minutes. I can do that at a swim meet. I can do that wherever I am. I don't need to be in an office, in order to review data and figures and, the analysis for that particular report. So that's something I can knock off.
Right.
What you don't want to do, in my view, is not have a plan. And I think that's where a lot of people get trapped and they start falling back into this work-life balance, because if you're just there and you've got nothing particular to work on and you just open up your email, you can just live in there for ever. right? And then when you're done with your email or whatever, which you're never done with email if you're in this orbit, then Facebook, right? Because I need something else to scroll. My mind is in scrolling mode, and then all of a sudden, you're on the Wall Street Journal reading about whatever they decided to write about that particular Saturday, which is totally useless in general for your life. Like that's where you get into like this death scroll if you don't have a plan. So I do think you need a plan. Some people work all taskless. I don't like that because I think it's unstructured. The stuff you don't want to do always goes to the bottom. But it's to each his own.
There's a lot of people that are listening to the pod for the first time, and they're just getting into business, entrepreneurship, the law.
Yeah.
Right. What are the mistakes that you've made when you're just starting? Like you kind of see repeat over and over again, right? Because usually in our space, you usually see one of two things with people just starting in business. Well, not necessarily even in business, but also just as employees, right?
Yeah.
They try to take on too much, and they don't really know how to balance that.
Right.
Not using the word balance, which you don't like, but they don't know how to integrate it or balance it.
Right.
They're just doing a lot
Yeah.
to say they can achieve a lot.
Right.
So that's one thing that I've seen. Second thing is, there is no organization to the process right at all. It's just do a lot of stuff. And because of that, you see a lot of crash and burn, and they have to, go back up again. And,
Right.
Is that something you see in the legal space for those that are starting for the first time, like that are, they're thrown right into the fire and they're just kind of like, I've got to do everything, and then it hits a cliff? Or is that
I think really what I see the most, and I at different points have suffered from both of these things and different pursuits. But on the one hand, it's I have to do everything now.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, it's showing up is I think it was Woody Allen said showing up is 98% of the battle.
Yeah,
like that is that's total horseshit.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just not true.
Yeah.
People show up all the time and put in the time and are never successful, right? We know that. We also know that there are people that have thousands of ideas like a minute, but they never actually put a plan in place, or more importantly, take action to actually start those things, right? And so taking action is really the key. So for me, no matter what field people are in or what it is that they're trying to do, I think you really got to start at the top. And I always say, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And like, be as detailed as possible, like ultimate level of detail. Like, tell me what car you're driving and what color it is, and like, your blazer and where you're living and who you're living with and what you're doing throughout your day. And then you take that kind of huge piece and break it down into those manageable steps, so that when you show up for your first day at a law firm or, at a business or whatever, you have a plan that you are executing. You're not just showing up. And the other side of that is there are a lot of people with a lot of good ideas and a lot of good plans, but they never take any action. Yeah. Right. And so I was reading something today actually about a college student who felt like, he had a really good background, really good resume, really good scores. He had all these ideas about things he wanted to do in college and kind of change the world. And he showed up for his college admissions interview, and they wanted to know what he had done. What did you do in high school? And the truth was, he hadn't really done anything. He had thought a lot about what he would do once he got out. He had thought a lot about the next step and what he would do, but he never spent the time to actually do anything extracurricularly or otherwise in that spot, in that moment. Yeah. Professionals do the same thing, right? They show up. They get a paycheck for showing up and for doing the work, and they just keep showing up and doing the work. Yeah. And for some people, that's okay. If you want to just show up and do the work and you feel fulfilled with that, fine. But you should always be building something, whether, in my view, whether it's in your personal life, whether it's in your professional life, whether it's a side hustle or a side gig or whatever. We are meant to build. Yeah. That's what we are. People are builders. We build community. We build society, and so we have to be building in order to be fully fulfilled. But you got to have a plan. And I think that's where a lot of people fall down, is they never spend the time planning what it is that they want to achieve.
But some people make that plan, and this is, I think, a really important thing, because there's always going to be more failures than successes. I don't give a damn what anybody says. Right. Like, there just is, right?
Of course.
So it's just part of the process. It's part of learning is having a failure. Hopefully they're not massive, right? Sometimes they are for everybody. Yeah. So, I mean, how do you deal with that? If you planned everything out, you thought everything was going to go like this, and it went a totally different direction, right? Yeah. Is analysis more important, or are you grinding, in your view, are you just continuing to grind away at this and just be like, look, this was going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
There was a chance that X was going to happen. Now that has happened, I just need to keep grinding away. Or do I need to stop and analyze? Analyze what's going on.
Yeah. So I think two things. First of all, I think that failure has to be part of the plan, right? I always say you pick your pain. Right, and there's two types of pain whenever we're going to engage in any new exercise. The first is the pain from just not doing it. Right, there's a certain pain associated with that, because we will always think about it when we see anyone else doing it. We will always know that we thought about doing it, we could have done it, and we didn't do it. And there will always be this like lingering pain of, well, what if? And then there is the pain of knowing that when we start something, it may not be a roaring success. And so in those moments, we really have two choices. We can stick with it, or we can cut our losses and move on to the next thing, right? And I have a thing. It's actually the last email in my inbox, and it's been there for, 20 years or more, back when I was in high school. But it just says simply this: trust in God and do the next thing, right? Whatever it is, when you get to the bottom, when those emails stop because the project has died, there's no man left on the battlefield, it is over. Trust in God and do the next thing. Just whatever it is, pick it up and do it. And so for me, interestingly and strangely, I've read a lot of Stoic philosophy. I don't necessarily subscribe to it, or even most of it. But I think that the Stoic outlook of planning for the worst is really useful as a general sort of operating module for life. Because if you have as part of your plan, what are we going to do if this all blows up and goes haywire? Like, what's the next thing? Then you don't have a lot of time to spend in grief and misery when you're at the bottom, right? Because you have to start building again.
Right.
And to your point, hopefully, whatever the project was, whatever the endeavor was, you've, gotten to a higher plateau than you were at.
Right.
Even if it's a failure, such that you're starting to build from a higher place. But I'm a firm believer that failure has to be part of, every plan. Yeah. And we do this in every aspect of life, right? I'll just give you a little personal anecdote, but I took all the kids to get haircuts. I actually still need one, because when you're going with, I actually only took 3 of the 4 kids to get haircuts, but when you're going with,
that's still a dream.
When you go with 3 kids, you really don't have time to sit there and get your haircut. It was the baby's first haircut and all this sort of stuff. He did a very good job. You can see that on Facebook. But anyway, my oldest son said, I feel like if I get a lightning bolt cut into my hair, then I will win the Pinewood Derby at Cub Scouts. Okay. So it's like,
that's a mentality.
That's a mentality. Yeah. All right. I like that. Manifesting. I believe in the power of intention.
Right.
You're only 8 years old once. That is not the photo of the haircut that his mother sent me with to the barber shop.
Yeah.
We have not discussed a lightning bolt, because a lightning bolt had not come up at that point.
Yeah.
But you're there in that moment and you're like, okay, well, what do I do? And he says, oh, and my friend at Church Camden has a lightning bolt as well, and I think it's pretty cool. So I rationalize, whatever you want to call it. You're only 8 once. Let's get the lightning bolt.
Here we go.
Pinewood Derby's the next day. So we're going to have a very short anticipation period between getting the lightning bolt and determining whether or not the lightning bolt was helpful in winning this Pinewood Derby. So as I'm sitting there in the barbershop, like just in, personal fault, I start thinking about, well, if he doesn't win the Pinewood Derby, Like, what does the conversation look like about the lightning bolt, right? So I'm going through all these things in my mind. So I've got a plan. I got a plan if we lose. I got a plan if we win. Turns out he won the Pinewood Derby on Sunday, so he's going to districts or whatever. So the lightning bolt, I mean, it was the key.
Okay.
I think his grandfather's work on the car, because I'm only in charge of helping him paint the car. I'm not in charge of helping build the car because he's very competitive and wants to win. And he feels like his grandfather, Kenny, can help better with that. And obviously, it worked out. So anyway, even in those moments, you're thinking about, okay, what's the worst that can happen? Yeah. What's the worst conversation? Because once you've prepared yourself for that, when and if it happens, there's a lot less emotion tied up in it.
Of course.
You've already processed it.
Right.
I've already been there. I've seen the tears. I've seen the losing. And he's not a kid that would cry at the Pinewood Derby, but he would be very disappointed when we got back to the car.
Yeah.
And so that's where that conversation would happen. So I've already been there. Right. So if that happens, we're ready. We got a plan. We know what we're gonna say. Same thing, for trials. In every trial, I've got on counsel table. I have very few papers on counsel table, but one thing that I have with whoever I'm trying the case with, we have a sheet called appellate issues.
Yeah.
And the trick is to always record the appellate issue about 4 to 5 minutes after it actually happens, so that no one sees you writing it down.
Yeah.
But we do that, right? And at some points during trial, we're not. You're not manufacturing appellate issues because issues are just happening. Judges are ruling out, judges rule, the other side's doing what the other side does, but you're preserving them and writing them down. And now, do we intend to lose the trial? No, of course not. We are.
You're going to play to win.
We're going to play to win.
Yeah.
We're on a contingency fee, which means if we don't win, we don't get paid. So what we did was, all for charity or whatever, however you want to look at it. But you're planning for that because if that doesn't happen and you don't win, you got to plan for the failure.
Right.
So I think any plan, some people call that negative thinking and all like that. I think it's important.
There was a side note, and this could be a useful anecdote for people that are listening to the podcast. But I was in my undergraduate days, a lot of my work was done with the guy who pretty much was the father of modern day applied sports psychology, Ken Rivera. Right. He was, with Cal State Fullerton. He was with the Cubs. I mean, pretty much every elite athlete has something that Ken has done. And what Ken was big on was handing out stickers to people. That was kind of his thing. And I had 2 stickers in my apartment in college, I remember, and I still think of them. One was just a stop sign. It was just things are going bad, just stop.
Right.
There's no reason to continue to think the bad thoughts. Next to that was a sticker of a stoplight. And that was just how the process would work. Stop, read, analyze, right? Make your decisions, look around, be aware of yourself, and then move on.
Yeah.
Right, and agree. And I think that's important for everyone, right?
Yeah.
I think people think, stop, oh shit, right? And there's no plan after that, right? It's okay to analyze what's going on, take a deep breath, right?
Yeah.
Because physical awareness,
right,
and physical relaxation, and people don't realize when they get tense and things don't work and they fail. Part of what happens is they stop breathing.
Correct.
Because of that, there's not as much oxygen going to the brain.
Right.
And because of that, they can't function.
Right.
And I think that's something that just simple things like that. It doesn't need to be this big, complicated heart surgery, 7-hour plan. It's okay, when I fail, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. No, it's just stop and get a grip in the moment, right? Yeah. And I think especially when for those listening to the podcast, obviously this is a Law Dad Roy podcast, but same thing with your kids, right? And so when there's a panic attack, when they get hurt, the first thing you're trying to do is just stop. Let's calm down for a second. Stop and calm down, right?
Yeah. No, 100%. I think that's actually really good, solid advice and a good visual, right? A good visual is always part of good advice. I always say, around here, kind of in life, the fastest way to stop digging a hole is to stop.
Just stop digging it all together.
Yeah. Stop digging. Yeah. So many people substitute action for progress, right? And they feel like, well, if we're engaged in activity, if we're doing things, then by definition, we're making progress. No, you're not. Sometimes you make the best progress just by stopping and and getting out of the way.
The mistake that all work is good work is not that is such a massive mistake.
Correct.
Yeah, such a massive mistake.
Yeah, it is not, it's 100% not accurate. I mean, you get into this cycle where, again, it goes back to people think, well, if I'm showing up and I'm working, no. Stop. What's the objective of your work?
Yeah.
Working longer, working harder is not always the way. Most often it's working smarter.
Yeah.
Let's figure out what the objective that we're trying to accomplish is and figure out how to get there.
Right.
If we find ourselves failing, if we find ourselves digging a hole, stop digging.
Right.
Take that, set it aside. Let's figure out how to get out of the hole. We can come back and deal with that. We can deal with whatever is already messed up, whatever is already broken, whatever relationship needs mending. Like, we're going to have to do that anyway.
Yeah.
But let's not break other things on the way down, right? Let's stop breaking things. Let's get out. Let's take a look, figure out what it is we need to do, come up with a plan, and then re-engage.
There's a great scene in the movie The Last Samurai where, they lead up to this point to where, Tom Cruise, if you haven't seen it, was a Civil War, commander who then goes to Japan, and he's there to train all these, to fight the samurai, to try to Americanize the Japanese army.
I hope you got that right.
Right.
I had no idea.
I did.
Okay.
True story.
All right.
But the problem is he was an alcoholic throughout the majority of the movie.
Right.
He goes to Japan. He doesn't become an alcoholic. He stops being an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Well, he's about to get jumped by 7 or 8 guys. And what he learns when he's captive in this camp in Japan, there's a scene, the whole scene slows down, and he's actually looking around at what's going on. Compared to what he was doing in the past, where everything was just reactive and drinking and reactive.
Right.
The whole scene slows down, and he's able to realize what's going on. It's like, in order to do this, I need to do this. And they slow the music down. And he's successful. And I've used that. He's successful in the movie and staying alive, right?
Right.
And I've used that example with athletes, too. It's like you're under attack. You feel like you're under attack by all these thoughts, all these people, your opinions of 100 different people. Most important thing is, obviously, you want to take in what they're saying, but just stop and slow down for a second.
Right.
You can't take in 100 things at one time.
Right.
And I think that, especially when you're starting, you want to impress your boss. You want to impress your boss's boss.
Right.
You want to impress the people that work with you, right? And rather than just realize, like, taking your time and slowing things down and doing things smartly,
right?
Rather than, you don't need to stay in the office for 3 straight days, right? It's just do what you're assigned to do in the correct way and communicate effectively, right? Rather than just do it all at one time.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, so we're coaching this machine pitch team right now for 7, 8-year-olds, I think it is, maybe 9, I don't know. My son's 8, so they're around the age of 8, whatever it is. And when you're swinging a bat, everybody just thinks, especially little kids, they need to go up there and just get as many reps in as possible, right? Yeah. That's just the thing. We just want to hit. Most often, your hit will be improved, your swing will be improved if you step back and do something totally unconventional, right? That doesn't involve hitting the ball with the bat in the normal, position. Yeah. And it's a very difficult but very important concept. And I tell you, these kids, like last week, the reason I thought of this, we have practice tonight, but last week we're working on their swing, and I had them hug the bat basically and hold it the opposite way so that the end of the bat is out here and they're holding the barrel of the bat. Because what that does is we work on their turn, right? So in order to hit the ball with that little piece of the bat while you're hugging the bat, you have to have a really good, solid body.
Turn your shoulder.
You got to turn the whole thing, right? And
Roy just gave a great example if you're watching.
Yeah, great. Yeah, if you're looking to be a baseball player. But anyway, like little kids often don't get the turn, right? They don't understand the physics of how the whole body is used to hit the ball. We're not using the bat, right? They see a bat, they see a ball, just like a hammer and a nail. Okay, use bat, hit ball, right? And so doing that, really helps them, and it's amazing. So, like in that little exercise, I had them do 15 hits just off the tee, one after the other, and then I let them swing again. Yeah. they could see the difference, right? And so when you have that visual and they're like, oh yeah, like the ball went farther when I hit it. It's like, yeah, because you're hitting it with your whole body. You know, it's not perfect. But those are the sort of things like in our lives so often that we think, okay, bat, ball, hammer, nail, email, response. I mean, you know, like one of the things in life that drives me the most crazy are people that feel like they have to respond to an email, even if they have like nothing to say. It's like, well, the email came to me. Yeah, it came to you and 36 other people because it was asking like a question. You don't have to contribute if you don't have anything to contribute, okay?
Right.
Anyway, personal pet peeve. But most people get an email response.
Right.
Right? Like social media is like really bad at training people that, you know, there's this constant,
Gotta respond right now.
Yeah, constant feedback response loop. There's not. Like email did not replace phone calls. It did not replace text messages. Like email replaced snail mail.
Yeah.
You got your snail mail once a day. Okay? And it took 3, 5, sometimes it never got to you, but took a number of days to get to you. Email's purpose was so that you would receive the mail the same day and be able to respond if you need to.
Right.
There's plenty of mail you get that you don't need to respond to. Every piece of mail you get, you don't write them a letter back. Oh, thank you so much for your extended car warranty offer. I'll decline. You throw it away.
Yeah.
You can do that in email too.
Yeah.
It's called archive. It's called delete, right? And you don't have to respond in the moment. If it's that important, they can call you. They can text you, whatever. Like, again, schedule emails twice a day, 3 times a day. If you feel like you really want to be overly responsive, is plenty. Like, people are in meetings, people are having surgery, people are sitting on toilets. Like, although toilets,
people are doing podcasts,
they're doing emails on their toilets.
Yeah.
But like, it's okay to have a break between the email and the response. Now, courtesy is if someone just sends you an email and says, hey, XYZ, can you do this? It's perfectly okay to say, yes, I'll do that Friday before 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you have to do it right then.
Yeah.
It's the equivalent of getting a letter that says, hey, we have this important project. We would like for you to contribute in this way. Okay. Well, I will. But I don't have any time on my calendar until X time. So courteous thing to do, in my view, is to respond and say, received your email. Happy to help with that. Happy to look into that. I'll get you a response by Friday at 3. Now, then I schedule it. If for whatever reason, Friday at 3 comes around, I haven't done that, I see it on my schedule, and I need to bump it forward, I say, hey, didn't get to it, I'll get to it Tuesday at 2.
Yeah.
Whatever. Email, email is one of those things. Like, you talk about work-life integration. So many people get trapped in that email doom, and can never bust out of it.
Well, speaking of work-life integration, Roy has to get to his next meeting, so we're going to be wrapping up. Our pod here soon. Right. But I think that if you guys have questions about, those of you that are listening, those of you that are watching, if you have questions about work-life integration, if you have questions about that, send us a message on Instagram at LawDadRoy. Send us a message on LinkedIn. You'll be happy to address those later in other podcasts.
Yeah, for sure.
Also, Roy responds to messages, and personally. So if you have any questions, let us know, and we'll be happy to address them as podcast moves on.
And we'd love to hear from you. If you think anything that we've said today kind of sparked an idea, if you have a different way of handling it, if you think anything is just total crap and you want to say that, weigh in. Let us know. Thick-skinned. We're all figuring this out together. So thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to catching you on the next one. Thank you for listening to the Law Dad Roy podcast. If you have any questions for me that we can talk about on the pod, follow us, DM us on Instagram, reach out on Instagram. We're at Law Dad Roy. You can find us there on YouTube, Facebook, wherever you decide to connect. We look forward to hearing from you.
Law Dad listeners, next week we're diving deep with PWA Chief Growth Officer Chris Covert, where he and Roy will chat about the lie known as work-life balance. We'll talk burnout, boundaries, and why chasing balance might actually be what's throwing you off. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. See you next, and every Monday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, wherever you find your podcasts.